Ah, come in. Come in, my son. Yes, yes, come, sit.
Hello.
Now, before we begin, I don't know if you've been reading any of my Google reviews, but I must tell you that I am a real witch, and I am a real psychic, and whatever you've read is not true, and I'm serious.
Okay.
Today, we'll be communing with the spirits on your behalf. Now, I'm sensing a disturbance. I'm sensing an interference with the spirits. There's something they're not liking. If I could only think of what it is. Yes, something's really clouding the airways here. Ah, wonderful. Yes, the path is cleared.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask, I've just really been having trouble with...
Don't tell me one syllable tit or tattle of your question. I will receive it from you. Think it clearly as you can and send it to me. Send me your energy from your third eye point. Send it to me from that Ajna chakra. Send it to me, and I will receive your question from the spirits. Yes, I have it. Let's consult the cards, shall we? Hello? Hello? Who's that? That's the spirits with an answer. 78 pickup! Only joking, just a bit of humor. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and finally, the answer.
Oh my. What? This is a very bad omen. What? What is it? This is the only card in the entire deck that means that you have a gigantic ass.
Oh, shit!
Greetings and welcome, you brave cosmic traveler, to ZEIT HEIST. I'm Josh Gaines, and you may be asking, what exactly is ZEIT HEIST? And I would posit that the better question is, what isn't ZEIT HEIST? ZEIT HEIST is a playful but sincere, imaginative, creative inquiry into the world of the occult, spirituality, meditation, mysticism, and the rest of life as well. Each program will be amorphous, different, taking different structure, centered around a conversation with some kind of individual. Coming to you from a secret, undisclosed location deep underground, a professional broadcast studio, and not a bedroom with a blanket tacked to the wall and a little star thing that I got my child for Christmas. It's none of those things. We have an entire team of professionals working around the clock to bring you the highest quality and top of the line occult content. This week's guest, Daniel Kerwood, a master magician, a master musician in the fields of jazz and metal, a liberated soul here to unlock for us just a few of the mysteries of the universe. This is interesting because the first time I ever talked to you back in October of last year, between that time and April this year, your perspective on Goetia seemed to change. Because at the time, or maybe you were just being careful with me as a young magician to like, no, probably not. I took it as like direct. So, but you were saying basically like interacting with Goetia is like getting in with the mob for $20. Like it's not worth the burden. But then by the time I talked to you in April, you were saying that like, demons are not bad, and that essentially, if I understood you rightly, it's like when you're non-attached, you can and have. I think one needs to achieve a certain state to be able to interact with them in the proper way. And you can tell me if I'm wrong about that. Yeah, how are they not bad, and yet why are so many starting magicians scared of them, freaked out, and that they experience them as like chaotic and crazy, and maybe even manifesting problematic issues in life.
Yeah, well, that change of opinion is not really an opinion that was ever changed. It's just that my opinion on that, for me, is what works for me. Because for
Okay.
me, I have absolutely no reason to use the Goetia for anything because I see
Ah,
it as going to the mafia for $20. Because
gotcha.
what
Okay.
I need is very, very, very little. I used to have 4 or 5 temples in my room, and now I just have one that is just devoted to Kali, that I do my meditations at, that I do my mantras at, and that I just do. That's kind of like my little hub. But Goetia is not bad because it startles you. And the greatest thing about it something startling you is it makes you question your sense of self, which is why it's really good and really bad for magicians to get into that right away, because some people are adrenaline junkies and they just want to see if something works. So that's
Mm,
why they'll do Goetia, which then again is very topical. But the reason why there's such a negative stigma around Goetia is because of the preparatory immersion that is supposed to take place beforehand. Israel Regardi talked about. He thought that people should like go to therapy or have like mental health evaluations from like 6 months to a year before they join the Golden Dawn, because a lot
hmm.
of what people do is they try to find very spiritual solutions for very mundane problems. I've been
Ah,
around very many people like that. Like the most common example I give, that I probably even gave last time and the time before we talked, but it's just pretty useful, is that if you have a headache, you can pray to all the medicine Buddhas and anoint yourself with this thrice illustrious oil and do all these meditations, or you can go to Walgreens and take an Advil. And then your a headache will be gone
yeah.
in an hour. Or you can do a 3-day sadhana where you fast and pray to all the medicine Buddhas. It's like, yeah, well, sometimes you just got to take the Advil, man. Like, hey, if you're
Right.
going through all this bad shit in your life, maybe stop doing bad shit and maybe go to therapy instead of trying to evoke a whole bunch of demons. Because all they're gonna do is they're gonna throw that stuff right back in your face, because they're going to be really honest with you
Yeah.
and they're going to say, hey, you're being fucking stupid and this is what you're doing wrong. And a lot of people say, oh, that's the demon's evil. It's like, well, no, they're trying to do that because they're trying to get you to think. Magic wouldn't be worth doing then if all you did was go there and they were like, the prophet is here. Because then that would be really cool the first time, but then you would get tired of it really fast. It's kind of like whenever you beat a video game and you're at the end game, you don't play it for another 100 hours. You kind of like dick around for a little bit and you're like, okay, well, I kind of did the thing, I guess. There's nothing really
Yeah.
else to do. So then you just kind of stop playing it. It's the same thing there. But the negative stigma also comes from the cultural side and the fact that the occult community likes to make a mountain out of a molehill about things, because that's
Mm,
part of what keeps the culture alive, is just bullshit talk, like how they said that Enochian magic is the most dangerous form of magic you can possibly do and that it could kill you and that you need to do 10 to 15 years of regular practical magic. And it's like, I don't know. I think life's way too short to do any of that. Even the most dangerous magic in the world, which is certainly Enochian magic, is not nearly as dangerous as driving your car in traffic or being out in the world on a busy city street. You're more
sure.
likely to get shot by a random mass shooter or get struck by lightning or get eaten by a bear or die in a car accident than you are to really have anything truly, truly negative happen to you in any kind of magical operation. Because one thing that you realize is
Yeah.
that the conduit that you're interfacing with is just an aspect of yourself that you don't yet understand. And you start to understand that by uncovering the layers. It's like riding an elephant looking for an elephant until you realize that you've been riding an elephant the whole time, and that you see other people riding elephants and you're like, well, they're not looking for elephants. What where the fuck did they get these elephants from? Until they're like, dude, look down. But I mean, that's
Yeah.
important to do. I think that to be able to realize that you don't need to do something, sometimes you have to do it. And I think that not doing Goetia, in order to come to that realization that you don't need to do Goetia, sometimes you have to do it. It's like if you tell a kid, hey, that's hot, don't touch it. Even if they know that it's hot, sometimes they need to learn that it's not to touch it by touching it. And there's
Right.
nothing inherently wrong with that. I think that's totally fine. So my opinion was a bit more brutal at the time, because I was like, you don't need any of that shit. Just read the Upanishads and meditate 2 hours a day and just eat rice and lentils and you'll be fine. It's like, yeah, but that leaves people pretty high and dry. Because that doesn't address a lot of the problems. They're like, yeah, I can do that, but why am I suffering? Like, why do I feel the need to search far and wide for some magical path? Other people are just blissfully ignorant and they're doing fine. Are they better off than me because they don't even think about this shit? And is magic just like this gigantic collective psychosis of the subtle psychology of man? Is this all just like a mental masturbation that we do to cope with the fact that we're gonna fucking die someday? And the
Yeah.
answer is no, absolutely not. Magic does work, but those are really, really good questions to ask. And it is asking those questions that will bring that sort of acute suffering into view so that liberation from suffering is possible. I'm kind of trying to write about this a little bit, and the biggest thing that I am saying is that liberation from suffering is only possible because of suffering. So it's like really weird, and I don't even want it to seem masochistic, but being grateful for suffering is something that you can do after prolonged meditation, because if there was no problem, you would seek no solution. So it is through the vehicle of suffering that we learn about liberation in the first place. And that's why those demons, especially something like Lucifer, he was just considered like the great initiator amongst many occultists. So he gives you the opportunity to liberate yourself by throwing you into the shit. Because the biggest thing that most people are is boring and mediocre.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they don't do anything in their lives that will cater to them having some existential crisis that will make them question everything. All they do is they just consume the same shit everybody else does, and they just blindly go through life until they die, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not ever going to make you think like, wonder what Lucifer's about. Like, you're not just going to like come to that assumption, or like, I think I'm going to summon a demon today, or I think I'm going to meditate for 6 hours nonstop today. It's like, no, you do that because you feel some kind of dissonance. And a lot of people say, well, I've suffered so long, when is it going to stop? And I feel like I've suffered long enough. Why can't I just become enlightened? Why isn't it going to stop? It's like, well, it's not going to stop because you have a rare chance to be aware of that suffering, because everybody is suffering. Life is suffering, but it's being aware of that suffering that you have the opportunity to transcend it. But if you make yourself believe that you're not suffering, then there's no point in it at all. Now, of course, you don't want to perform strict austerities and make yourself suffer even more. Just like wander around in rags and starve yourself and hold your arm up for 10 hours a day and say, well, I'm suffering, and to all be realized. It's like, no, you don't just want to like become a doormat for suffering. You still have to have discernment. But the biggest thing that the left-hand path does in the beginning, because eventually you should leave it, because one thing that Jason Louv talked about, he says, is all these magical schools, one thing that people forget is what do you do in regular school? You graduate. You don't stay in high school forever. You're not 25 years old still hanging out with the seniors, because you'd be super lame. Same thing with magical schools. You get something out of it, and then you say, what did I learn from that? And then you kind of add that to your lexicon, and then you move on.
Yeah.
So if you stick around long enough, you're just gonna, you either want to die a hero, or you don't want to live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And the villain in that case is the villain of complacency, which I think is really the only true evil thing that someone can do. Only evil in a sense, because it's just about a lack of awareness. Because awareness will make you be aware of the nature of attachment, and the fact that the processes that we engage in really have nothing to do with transcendence. It's about our attachment to them. And we shouldn't have to give up or indulge anything to justify that. We should be able to become unattached and ideally do anything. Like Swami Sarvapriyananda says, if you're truly not attached, you should be able to go to a bar, get drunk, get in a fist fight, and stumble home and still be in samadhi the whole time. It's like, yeah, you absolutely should be able to, because non-attachment should allow you to then engage in spiritual life. So that's what the left-hand path is good for. And the left-hand path is not afraid to talk about fringe topics like non-duality, which, by the way, non-duality is a very, very fringe topic. That is really hard to talk to someone to say, hey, so you're not the body or the mind, by the way. So you're like this eternal witness consciousness that experiences all things. You're not the wake world or the dream world or the deep sleep world, because there's something experiencing deep sleep, because it's not an absence of experience, but it's an experience of absence. And the experiencer of that experience of absence is who you truly are. People are going to go, yeah, great, my life still sucks. It's like you can tell them that, but that's not going to change the fact that they have cancer, or that they have a shitty relationship, or that their son is at war and they still miss them. So non-attachment, topically at first, does not give you any promises. It can leave you feeling really, really high and dry. But one thing that non-attachment is based on, that now black magic is starting to get around to, is the idea of renunciation, which is not outward renunciation, but inward renunciation, basically. And that renunciation is a bit of a loaded term, because that can kind of mean that you're suppressing something. Like if you renounce sex, that means you would not be a fool if you thought that if I said that I was completely renouncing sex, that I would be suppressing the need to do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that. It means the caveat is it's the renunciation to the attachment, because everything is of Brahman but is not Brahman, because the thing experiencing everything is the ultimate reality. But then that means if everything is of it, then in terms of like chaos magic, then all is permitted. The only thing that isn't permitted is something that detracts from your awareness to think that. So that would be the only parting advice that they give people, is if you're incapable of still going through that intellectual prolonged inquiry into the nature of self, then you can check yourself. Because then if you're like, well, I'm not the Atman Brahman, I'm going to take 9 shots. It's like, yeah, after you take 9 shots of vodka, I doubt you're going to be able to think about anything. So maybe don't take 9 shots, but that doesn't mean that alcohol is evil. Just like the sink analogy, like some people can wash their hands and it's totally fine, and other people have to wash their hands 47 times specifically when the clock strikes 1. And it doesn't mean that sinks are evil and they possess people. It just has to do with the specific person. So it's not the, and in this case, it's like it's not the drug, it's the person, which is a pretty extreme stance to take. But then that means that you don't have to keep cutting everything out of your life, because that is the biggest psychotic argument of the occult community, is repression versus indulgence. And both of those cater to just the same craving and aversion cycle of samsara, or the cyclic existence of suffering. It's the snake that eats itself in the bad way that uncycles that just constant cycle of suffering. Is that if you feel that something is bad, then that means indulge in it, because then that's adversarial. It's like, well, no, that's not the answer either. But then if you feel like something is bad, then it's also not bad to just not think about it and then just not do it, because then you can never really come to why it happened in the first place and come to the nature of it. It's kind of like if you were an alcoholic, you can't just say, well, drinking is bad and I'm just going to stop because drinking is bad. It's like, no, you don't do that because other people tell you it's bad. You do it because you want to stop, because you've like philosophically, spiritually, emotionally come to that resolve that this is something that other people can do and that it's still going to exist without you, but that you are an alcoholic. And that doesn't change that anything else in the world around you. That doesn't mean that you need to renounce the idea of alcohol. If anything, leaning into the fact that you're an alcoholic is going to be what helps you stop drinking. Instead of saying, well, I'm not an alcoholic and I'll just stop and I'll just act like I never drank. It's like, no, you're going to go absolutely insane. And you're going to end up like in a mental hospital trying to do that with any kind of intense craving that you have. But the best thing to do with that, and this comes from the Zen tradition, is you can just let it come, let it be, and let it go. So you don't have to do anything about it, but you can feel that. You can let it express itself, and you can come to that conclusion that because it's expressing itself and you're watching it express itself, that you are not that thought, and that thought is happening on its own. And that's how you can come to a very natural experience that you're not even the mind, because it's also not hard to tell someone that, like, yeah, the brain has a mind of its own, because you can just be walking through the streets and your brain's like boobies, or just like anything, just literally anything. You're like, God, why am I thinking about this right now? This is so stupid. It's because it's not you. So then, whenever you can have the patience and the forbearance to just sit with yourself and feel that feeling, then you can come to the natural conclusion that you are not the mind, which, tying back to left hand path magic, is something that is akin to Vedanta, which is direct experience. Because they say, instead of reading about magic or instead of reading about liberation, learn how to liberate yourself. Do these rituals, get in there, get dirty, start working in the flaming forge, and make your own tools to ignite your own godhood, which is a really, really noble intent. But upon further inspection, left hand path magic just takes from the tantric tradition mostly anyways. A lot of their like deepest ideals, I mean, it's also not hard to believe that everything is basically taken from the east. So the system
Sure.
of the OTO is just taken from, like, the Yoni Tantra, its supreme secret, and then all the god form assumptions. There are stuff written about that in the Kali Kola tradition that probably go back thousands and thousands of years. I mean, there are cave inscriptions of Kali from like 15,000 BC. So it's entirely possible that Kali was like a pre-Ice Age entity that people worshipped and did god form assumptions of, where they imagined that they were Kali. And in the Golden Dawn ritual series, there's a lot of times where you'll imagine that you're Thoth or something. Like if you're doing an invocation of Hod, which is like the eighth sphere on the tree of life, because that's related to like very mercurial intellectual knowledge. You can either invoke the god of Mercury, which is just Mercury, or you can do Hermes, or you can do Thoth. And Thoth has the most obvious image of like the ibis-headed beak with the scribe and everything. So then you can imagine yourself as that and add to the attributions, which is interesting. But that's ultimately just taken from the Eastern traditions of like the Indo-Aryan tradition of the rishis that ended up writing the Vedas and subsequently the Upanishads. Anyways, which is what brought me to Vedanta, because that has been the source of everything that I've studied, and I've been able to trace everything that I've studied back to Vedanta. I've been able to trace everything from making blood pacts with demons, all the way to Christ worship, all the way over to sex magic. I've been able to trace literally everything back to the Upanishads or the Advaita Vedanta texts, like the Aparokshanabhuti or the Ashtavakra Samhita or the Gita. Even because the Gita is like the prayer for Gita actually sounds pretty black magic if you hear about it, because you're worshiping Krishna, who is the destroyer of relative existence. And that's what demons are
Right.
supposed to do, is they're supposed to destroy your idea of existence so you can return to that blackened void of material creation of the 11-headed dragon, serpent, demon god of Azarate or something, But it's the same thing.
So let's talk about deities
Yeah.
and what they are actually. Like if non-duality is the true nature of everything, and deities are like, do we have, are deities our advocates, and or are there deities who are our adversaries? Is there anything in the universe that is manifesting itself as trying to keep us from waking up, or is that just all the abyss, and that everything that is God is just, do you know what I mean? Like it seems like angels are always pushing us towards, and maybe even demons, like, keep going, go further, go deeper, like, wake up. We're trying to get you to wake up. You're trying to manifest $100 and we're going like, no, pay attention. So
Yeah.
where do deities fall in that? And why do people throughout history and religion get so hung up on deities? Like, this is the one true God. Like, and I'm on my knees and like, this is the truth of everything, is like Apollo or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that feeling that they feel whenever they worship Apollo is still very real. That's not to take away from the authenticity of their experience, because Ramakrishna had his first experience in Samadhi when he was 7. And he had basically maintained his liberation after briefly losing it He went down to the Ganges and prayed to the Divine Mother Kali like every night at the Ganges for 3 years until he finally did the thing. And even after he attained supreme liberation, he still worshipped Kali every day. He lived in a Kali temple and worshipped Kali. And that really confused the shit out of me because I thought, well, if you're like super liberated, why do you need like anything? Why aren't you just like levitating in a forest or something? Just like just becoming nature and just being like,
Yeah.
it's like, well, why do you need anything? And Ramakrishna was still very engaged in the world. He was still very engaged with the students. I was like, man, I wouldn't be like that at all. This is a while ago that I thought this. But the what the deities do is they help us learn that we can imitate and assimilate and innovate that behavior. So that first part of that deity that we do is we find a deity that we like and we embody those characteristics in our day-to-day life. We can imitate those characteristics. So if you're naturally a very introverted person and you're very shy and you don't have a lot of force behind your speech and you're scared of public speaking, or you're just not a very assertive person, but you find yourself in a world that is very assertive and you need to put your foot down in life, you'll maybe go to a Kali temple and hear all these hymns and praises to Kali, and you'll see Kali naked, holding a severed head and feeding that blood and having severed arms as a skirt, and you're gonna go, holy shit, okay, cool. And then you can worship Kali and then feel that power, and then you can emulate that power, and then that'll make you more strong. Kali has nothing to do with the fact that you now feel more powerful, but Kali serves as another reflection of yourself, and you realize that what these deities do is you can take those attributions and go inwards, but then all you need to do afterwards is go inwards, and then you can kind of edit your own emotional stance because you realize how fluid and impermanent the self is by the fact that it can just worship a god once and then your personality totally changes, kind of like how little kids emulate superheroes after they see a movie. It's the same thing. It's never changed. But returning back to that childhood like innocence of imitation is really important because what that does is that breaks the mold of being a jaded adult, which is really important. So that's why deities are really there, because they can help you return back to that purity, and they can help you be okay shedding that sense of self and embodying a new behavior. But the failure comes in when people can't separate themselves from the deity and realize the thing experiencing the deity is the witness of all, and that is the thing. So there's I think it was in the Tao Te King, they said the eternal Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao, because if it was really the thing that birthed all creation and was anti-existent, the fact that you're even talking about it means that you're not really talking about it. We can conceptualize it, but it's not something that you can really talk about. So there, a lot of the experiences that people have with those deities is still very real, and that's why I still think deities are super important. Because at first my stance was like, man, fuck all this shit, fuck LBRPs, to hell with absolutely all of this. You just need to sit down and meditate and drag your balls through glass for years, like I did and like other people did, and then maybe you'll get it. It's like, no, dude, that's ridiculous, because I still have a Kali temple that brings so much energy into my life and my room, and I see the way that other people can be really rigid and really just like uptight about stuff, but then I talk about an entity that they're interested in, and their whole personality changes. They have a higher degree of openness. They become more compassionate. They become very interested. They drop this like bullshit bravado sense of self, and then they're just really interested in talking about connecting with that deity.
So
People that I would otherwise never be able to get along with.
I'm curious how like I've always wondered how these deities build such a how they get their attributes that across time and people and cultures, people like someone like Babalon, people will have the same, or like Thoth or Hermes for sure, or Archangel Raphael, whatever. Which I was very drawn to Archangel Raphael and Hermes at the very beginning of all this magic stuff because I just liked the attributes that they embody, and like as an artist and as a writer, that made sense to me. But my question was like, these entities seem to appear to people across time and culture with the same aspects. And so it's like, where did the initial where does that root in? Was there like one guy a long time ago who said this is what Hermes is like, and other people started experiencing that too? You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are aspects of our intellect that everybody wants to emulate because there are ideal personality traits that everybody wants to embody. And there have probably been different deities that embody those same like 8 or 10 aspects for tens of thousands of years. Like a deity that can just sit down and write and write and write, like how Hermes Trismegistus supposedly wrote like tens of thousands of books. Like, who the fuck doesn't want to sit down and just be able to write tens of thousands of books in a single lifetime? Like, even if you're not a writer, that just sounds awesome. Or to be able to embody divine love of Aphrodite or Venus, or
Yeah.
like the softer aspects of Isis or Shiva, which is like the blissful, nice feminine side of Shiva is Shambho, for example. So I'm pretty sure that that's been around as long as people have been around. The names have just changed to fit the culture, but it's ultimately the same thing. Like the divine goddess like Kali, even though I particularly like the attributes of Kali, there's
Hmm.
essentially no difference between Kali and Ishtar and Babylon and Isis and all of these other goddesses, because they preach the same things, and worshiping them will get you to the same place, which is what's most important. Like, as long as you're getting to that same place, I don't care if you worship like the flying spaghetti monster is a terrible example, but I don't care, like whatever god suits your temperament is something that you need to go to, which a lot of people say, well, no, you need to find something that perhaps you're not as drawn to, so that way you can shed the sense of self. It's like, no, I think you shed the sense of self by realizing why you like something so much, because then, as long as you're an honest seeker, you can say, God, why do I like this so much? It's because I don't have these personality traits, or this is something that I feel like is me, and which is why I want to embody these traits more. And that can help you with the inquiry into the nature of the self. So I think it is of paramount importance to find a deity, no matter what pantheon it is, and learn how to do some kind of devotional worship to that, because through that devotional worship is where you can shed the layers of yourself, because then whenever you can embody those characteristics that you like, through taking yourself out of the equation, you can realize that there never really was a you to begin with, and that those characteristics that you really like are closer to the real you, because the thing that experiences the experience of those characteristics is much closer, if not is, who you really are. But you can
Ooh.
never come to that unless you can really try to surrender to something like that.
Yeah. I love that. And that makes a lot of sense. But it's like, I think a lot of people, myself included, it takes so many steps normally to even get a hint of that is like the point, or that's where it's headed. So on that note, and this a little bit goes back to Goetia, but not so much, like, what about the entities that, at least for me, like, are scary, quote unquote, or like, I've been more drawn to Archangel Hanael and like Michael and Raphael and Gabriel,
Mhm.
but like, I haven't fucked with Cassiel or Samael yet, or Camael, because they
Yeah.
seem fucking severe in what I've read about. And
Mhm.
so I like,
Mhm.
and this shows how not very far down my path I am, Daniel, but that it's like, I don't want to call on Samael. He's going to be pissed at me for all the shit I'm getting wrong and how like a not holy I am. And like, I don't want that severe intensity yet. And yet I also want to be able to reach the state where I can receive that and not think it means, I mean, this plays into my like Christian programming bullshit as well.
Yeah.
Just fear of wrath of an entity.
Mhm.
But yeah, what about the question of moving towards the things that scare the shit out of us?
Well, the good news is that no matter what it is, whether it's a demonic or angelic entity, they will never ever give you more than you can handle.
Mm.
So because it ultimately comes from the enlightened version of you anyways. So the enlightened version of you isn't just going to fry your brain, because it's just it's another ray of sunshine that is reflecting off of the dewdrop of your body and mind, that, how even like a water droplet on a leaf will even have a little reflection of the sun, but it's ultimately just light from the sun. So you'll never get more than you can handle, which is a really comforting thing to do, which is why I urge people to do those operations of severity, because then they can realize that this threshold that they're imposing is totally fake and it is totally bullshit. And whenever they can break that threshold in a magical setting, they can break it in a material setting, in a social setting. That'll help them break through and be able to lead the next business meeting, or to talk to that A&R representative of that music label you were scared to talk to, or to talk to that producer that you were scared to talk to, or go to this meeting and put yourself out there. Because, well, I mean, in the simplest sense, you can say, well, yeah, and then if I can invoke Samael and do that, then I can fucking do anything, which is true in a sense. But then you can realize that there's nothing you can't handle, which is really, really comforting, as long as you go at it wholesomely, as long as you go at it with like really proper good intent. Like if you're coming at this from, you're like, hey, I'm going to invoke this, but I'm doing this because I know it will lead to my liberation from suffering and the causes of suffering, so I can hopefully one day help someone else do the same thing. Even if they do fuck with you, they're going to be doing it from a different angle. They're going to be doing it to teach you something, to move you further along the path. Because I mean, it's just like, it's just going to make you go faster, and it'll be faster than you're going to initially want. But ascension is really, really difficult, and it's something that you might as well try to lean into sooner than later. And you can even just take a test run and pick a deity like that and have someone trip sit you and do all the preparatory immersions, take a ritual bath, talk yourself into it and do it. But the rituals that I've been most scared of are the rituals that I ended up learning the most from, which is why it's I think a lot more advantageous to do that now. Like a lot of people are like, oh, maybe I'll do Enochian magic in 10 years. It's like, nah, you should try Enochian magic like fucking today. Like yesterday, like last year, because you're gonna die pretty soon. You could die anytime. To Tibetan monks, I was reading this book by Sogyal Rinpoche saying that they have a bowl that they drink water from, and what they do is they wash out that bowl and they turn it upside down on their bedside counter every night, as if they're not going to wake up and use it again. So they confront death every single day, and they confront the impermanence of their existence through doing tiny actions like that. And if they have a fireplace in their house or their hut or their meditation retreat, what they'll do is they'll put the fire out when they go to bed. So that way, if they die in their sleep, at least they won't waste a fire. So it's confronting death like that every day. And in a way, confronting an entity like Samael or any of the other operations of severity is really important, because it forces you to confront your own death. And it is only by confronting your own death that you can transcend your attachment to it. Because that's what immortality is. Immortality isn't keeping the same body that you have now, like the Count Saint Germain, and just levitating around the Himalayas, talking to Tibetan monks and UFOs, and giving people the elixir of immortality and scarlet, saffron, purple robes. It's like, no, that's not what it's about. Immortality means that you realize that after the body and mind dies, the thing that is aware of all that still remains. And if you can form a union with that, then after you die, you will escape reincarnation, because you've discovered the source of yourself, which I think is everybody's birthright. And I think it is entirely possible to do that in a single lifetime. If anything, I think that's what makes life worth living, is the transcendence of it. Because taking it back to a really simple example, because I'm not an alcoholic, I would argue, although I like really never drink, I would argue that I can enjoy alcohol way more than an alcoholic ever can. Because I can have a really nice beer, or I can have a glass of wine, or like a nice couple fingers of scotch, and then I can put it down and go about my day. And because I'm not creating that constant karmic imprint that can incur suffering, I can engage in something, but I'm not attached to it. I'm not like, oh my god, this drink is so good. Oh my god, this drink is so good. Oh my god, I'm gonna have fucking 10 of these. It's like, no, I'm just like, yep, this is nice, but I'm just not really attached to it. Like there's so many things that you do every day that you like, that you're just not even really attached to, but you don't really get to realize that until you shake it up. And you shake it up by doing those operations of severity, because then that will make you look at other aspects of your life that you're treating the same way, things that you're scared to do that you absolutely should not be scared to do.
Yeah, damn. I love that. That's huge. Well, time to do some operations of severity pretty soon here.
Yeah.
As far as the Eastern path, or at least one facet of the Eastern path, like I bought the book that you told me to get, the Swami Satyananda book about Kundalini Tantra, and it's
Yeah.
excellent. And I'm going through those practices now, and those are pretty difficult, I must say, honestly, but or difficult to get up and running. But so someone who has done, no ritual ceremonial Western magic, who's like just done meditation of this sort, or yoga, Raja yoga, they will still ultimately be confronted with these same sort of severe aspects of themselves, correct? Like,
Yes.
whether is that through opening the chakras, is that through Kundalini awakening? At what point is that happening, and how does that manifest?
So that happens through active work like Kundalini. Like Kundalini is a lot more generally active in just terms of like you're doing exercises for the chakras, and there's going to be, even though the chakras are still pretty illusory, it doesn't change the fact that they're still really fucking real, and you can still open them and have very specific experiences. Like there's not literally orbs of energy in your spirit body, but that doesn't change the fact that you can still open them and have a Kundalini awakening. Like that, it just because they're illusory doesn't mean that they're not real. They're as real as the illusion of Maya is. Which, if it's illusory as everything else around you, that means in a way it's still a real illusion, because it's something that our illusory body can still interact with. But the ordeals come through that and prolonged meditation, because a lot of people will start to get a meditative practice, and then they'll get really comfortable doing that, and they'll say, I meditate 20 minutes a day and it's awesome. And they're like, ooh, don't talk to me till I've done my meditation. People are like, don't talk to me till I've had my coffee.
Right.
I'll hear people like at the coffee shop in front of me, they're like, oh god, I just want to go home and fucking meditate. It's like, bad, because then people see it as an escape, where they're like, oh, I can't wait to go home and meditate. And then if any sound happens, they're like, well, you shut the fuck up, I'm trying to meditate. Almost like I'm speaking from experience, because I used to scream at my neighbors. I'm like, I'm trying to transcend suffering, and you're listening to this garbage music. And it's like, no, that's totally wrong, because the thing that's experiencing that noise,
I'm trying to
is the
reach
thing that is
enlightenment,
going-
you fucking asshole.
yeah.
Sorry,
I
go
threw a
ahead.
cooler at one of my neighbors because I was just so mad at them. Yeah, that's not very meditative behavior at all. But through longer meditations, the limits that you impose upon yourself, breaking them is what will help you realize those same things. So, in the Western magical tradition, contacting entity that is under the auspices of an operation of severity is that ordeal. But the ordeal with a meditative or Kundalini based practice is meditating for way longer than you normally would. A lot of people are like, "Oh, well, the max I can meditate for an hour is before it really starts. Like, I can feel the cognitive dissonance." I'm like, "Good. When the cognitive dissonance hits, that's more to work with. Sit down and meditate for 4 hours. It is going to be absolutely terrible, and it is going to suck total ass. But you know what isn't going to suck total ass the next time you do it? That. Because if you sat down and meditated for 4 hours today, it would be terrible. But it would be considerably less terrible if you did it tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And you will very quickly come to the conclusion that as long as you can keep your basic needs of ingestion of food and the excretion of it, you can pretty much meditate any length of time. And that you're only saying, oh, well, 2 hours. I've never meditated 2 hours before. And oh God, that's so long. And then your ego's like, yeah, it is a long time, you fucking stupid idiot. That's a really long time. And you're not there yet because you've only been meditating an hour a day. Look at all these other people and you're just stupid. You're just not one of them. It's like, that's precisely why you should
You
meditate.
must be the worst person to ever try meditating.
Yeah, it's like as soon as you start, your ego's like, wow, dude, you suck at this. Boo, But that's
right.
why you sit with it, because that's how you know where to go in a video game is you go where the enemies are shooting at you. Because you're like, oh, well, I guess this is the path, So that's the exact path to go, is where you feel that dissonance. Now you can use discernment and say, well, you don't want to go, well, I want to feel the maximum amount of dissonance, so I'll become homeless and starve myself. It's like, again, no. Like, you can still maintain an average life. You can still be a householder and put yourself through these deep practices. But I would argue that everybody has an hour a day that they can meditate. And I think an hour is a really perfect amount of time to practice, because there's a lot of studies that show that the brain can really start to quiet itself, depending on the person, about 40 to 50 minutes in is really when the brain is like, okay, fine. And that's when you can get flashes of genius. That's when you can get flashes of like, whether it's just like a stupid idea for an invention or something, or a really good idea for an invention, or a really good idea for a book, or a really good idea for a film. That's when those ideas start to happen. Whenever it's away from you, then that's when that divine inspiration can come. But you have to let it happen, because you cannot make yourself become inspired. So it's the same thing with meditation. You cannot make yourself become meditative. It has to become itself. Much like how in a ritual, the way that you get the ritual to happen is by doing the ritual and making your intent known with the spirit, and then releasing it and forgetting about it and let the subconscious chew on it. So you have to do the same thing with the mantra. That's why they do japa, or mantra recitations, where you do it with like the mala beads, where you say it, because a mantra starts to work in your day-to-day life when it repeats itself, when all you have to do is sit down and start it, and it's just kind of like pushing someone on a bicycle, and then you can watch it go, and you can listen to the mantra in your head repeat itself, like of its own free will and accord. So that's what you want to have happen with meditation, because that is an energy that you can build for that to happen, because it is more likely to happen every time you meditate. Although it may not feel like it, every meditation is getting a little bit easier.
And that seems to speak to like staying with the same practice like for a long time. And I mean, I am absolutely guilty of jumping around and switching it up, or reading a new book and being like, oh no, I have to try this. I have to try this. And I mean, it's like, I do have a certain level of discipline, but I also get really excited and something seems to call to me. But that, like, even through talking to you is like the reason that I switched from doing LBRPs and LBRH every day to just simply meditating. And now even I find myself getting impatient with the Kundalini, the just now, right now, doing the chakra practices, because there's a part of me that's just like, a little voice that's like, I really want to awaken. I really want to. And and yet another part of me is like, yeah, but you got to shut your brain up first and like just relax and stay with it. I don't know where I was going with that, but other than that, I get interested in different things, and yet I also recognize like I have got to stay with one for a while for things to really start happening, and things are happening. But I don't know how, if it could be graphed, like how close I am to samadhi. I have no idea. But all I know is that different things are happening than used to ever happen in everyday life, and feeling energy and sensation around me that's like, holy shit, I don't know what this is. And I'm a little scared that like something's going to pop out at me like The Conjuring, because it's so strange. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's good to uncover those different layers of awareness, but that is the biggest operation of severity, which is what separates the real spiritual practitioners from these consumers. Is that anyone can sit down and meditate once and get something out of it, but very, very, very few people sit down every day and meditate. Doesn't have to be at the same time, doesn't have to be for the same amount of time, but it's like learning any skill. If you're going to learn how to play guitar, don't just play a whole bunch the night before your guitar lesson and say, oh, well, I'll just do that. It's like, nope, that's not how that works. You wouldn't work out that way. You wouldn't say, I haven't worked out for 6 days, so I'm just going to go to the gym and work out for 7 hours straight, and then I'll just build 7 times the muscle. It's like, no, it's not, definitely not how that works. So that's what a lot of people do, is they're like, well, I'll meditate 5 minutes a day. Oops, I skipped a day. I'll just meditate 10 minutes tomorrow. It's like, no, whatever you need to do to instill that, you need to challenge your sense of self by sacrificing other things for meditation. Now, it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your relationship, or it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your sensual pleasures or whatever food you eat. You can eat and do whatever you want, but I guarantee you that you will still have time for a meditative practice. You will be fine not watching that one Netflix episode, or not watching that one YouTube video. And whenever you find that you don't have time for meditation practice, or you just you were like, oh fuck, I forgot to do it today, or oh wow, I just don't have time to do it today, then you can start to audit your day-to-day abilities, and you can start to audit how often you're on your phone or how often
Mm.
you're sitting idle doing absolutely nothing, that is time that you could have spent meditating instead. And I'm not saying that you have to like withdraw from social media and Netflix and
Yeah.
everything. I mean, like the monk that I visit in Houston, Swami Atmarupananda, the Vedanta Society, that guy has a Netflix account.
Sure.
You know, he still has a laptop and an iPad, and he still watches TV shows, and he still does shit like everybody else, but he's disciplined. And
Mm.
discipline is the thing that separates success from just consuming another one of the infinite consumer experiences, because there's a trillion ways to meditate, and you will in your life never ever ever read all the books in the world about meditating, but you'd be a lot better off reading one or two and then just getting in there and try it. Because if you
Yeah.
want to learn how to ride a bike, the best way to do it is to just get on the bike, because you can read all the books about bike riding, it's not going to make you a bike rider,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
And it's, gosh, it's so easy to buy into, and I have been guilty of this myself, of just like, oh, this new app has been curated to perfectly match the brain waves of the and make you meditate, and it's just like, shut the fuck up. But I've they're so good at their little ad campaigns, or you use Headspace, and Andy has such a soothing voice, and it's like, it took me 3
Yeah.
years of meditating to even get something to start like picking up something. I mean, supernatural or mystical or just like other than ordinary experience. And I for
Yeah.
a lot of that time was just like, oh, meditating, helps me sleep better, makes me a little more calm. And like, I didn't ever know that it actually can lead somewhere, that it can lead somewhere very powerful and real, that is maybe the most important thing that a person can do. But there's so many fucking little gimmicks around to keep us distracted all the time, and to like try to fill a void, or to just try to be like cram every second of every day with impulsive pleasure until we're entertained to death,
Yeah.
So
Well, you're just saturated with just numbness then, because you just like Netflix binge 5 episodes that are all an hour long, and you're just like, "Gah," and you don't even really remember anything, but you just have like this general satisfaction that you feel. Yeah, that's a common thing. My parents are like that. They discovered Netflix in their older age, and that is just all they do. They're still very smart people, but it is impossible to try to get them to have a kind of meditative practice. But
yeah,
it's really really hard to do that every day, and I would say that is the hardest thing to do, is to meditate. And keep meditating the same way, because there are books and podcasts that are like, this is the newest best way to meditate, wear this head device, and it'll like the biofeedback systems, and like, I mean,
sure,
there's like CRISPR and all this other crazy shit that's coming out. But I would say that is one of the biggest operations of Severity, if not the biggest, is to remain in the midst of all that and see all that change as nothing but change. And that the fact that you can stay permanent in the midst of all that impermanence, that is true power. Whenever you can let those experiences happen but not indulge in them and say, that is a cool way to meditate, I have a way that works for me. And that's not staying close-minded, because you should always study what's happening with the world. Swami Vivekananda, even though he achieved enlightenment at a rather young age, he studied the religions of the world until he died, and he was always asking other people, like, what do you believe in, and why do you believe in that way, and tell me about it. Like, he talked to everybody from Hindus to magicians to Christian scientists, because he was just fascinated by them. And you should always be a student, but you should realize what works and what doesn't. And that's why a higher degree of open-mindedness, I use this term very
sure,
very very carefully, but one of the pitfalls of postmodernism is that they see an infinite amount of solutions as viable. And that is simply not the case. There may be an infinite amount of ways to drive a car, but the best way to drive a car is to sit in the driver's seat.
sure,
And there may be an infinite amount of ways to meditate. Yeah, there's probably like 2 or 3 that actually work. And the rest of them are just like mental masturbation.
yeah, yeah,
In terms of liberation from suffering, because that's why you
yeah,
meditate, is from moksha, for liberation. And all those other things, like it helps you sleep less, it helps you more energized, be more energized, it helps you regulate your energy. It produces gray matter in the brain, which can help you retain larger collections of information quicker. And there's even a PubMed research article came out about meditation that says that it lengthens your telomeres. Your telomeres are those things that are at the end of your chromosomes that are the most normative indicator of your lifespan. So they have found research that pretty much can objectively conclude that if you meditate, you will live longer. So all of those things are side effects and are great reasons to meditate, but those are like siddhis. Like you want to avoid indulging in those supernatural powers, because what that's doing is it's making it easier to meditate. Because then if you're naturally a calmer person and you can naturally sleep less and eat less and still have more energy, then you're going to have even more reasons to meditate. So it's trying to clear the path for you instead of saying, oh, wow, yeah, I meditate 20 minutes a day and I feel great. It's like, yeah, think how great you're going to feel if you meditate for 40 minutes a day. You know, it's like you got to keep it going. They're making it easier for you so you can keep going. Otherwise, it's like the people that learn like 3 really cool licks on guitar and then they're like, yep, I'm off to the races. It's like, no, now that you can turn that into 6 into 9 into 12.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's you should always keep going, because until you've had that moment of clarity, it should always be work. And meditation is something that you don't have to do sitting down with your eyes closed. One really cool thing that Sadhguru talks about is that you've probably meditated long enough that if you took a second right now and recalled what being meditative, or if you tried to recall what meditation feels like, you could probably do that to a certain degree. And compared to 3 years ago, if you tried to do that after you meditated, you'd have no idea how to conjure what that feels like. So the more that you meditate, the more that you're kind of brainwave and training that behavior of meditativeness, to the point where if something bad happens or if something crazy happens, then you can put that buffer of mindfulness and conjure that meditative state, imitate what it feels like to be meditative, and then you will be meditative, because your imagination is incredibly powerful, and you can strengthen that imagination through real practice like meditation. Because then whenever you can think that you're meditative, I mean, if you can think yourself sick, I would like to argue that you can think yourself more meditatively.
Yeah, certainly. What is your take on this idea of people achieving the rainbow body and like becoming, I mean, I've heard this referred to in different ways and explained different ways, but almost like a person becoming this super celestial entity who can choose to come back to the material plane, not with a body, but to almost be like an assistant to other people on this path and be like a little helper spirit. What do you think about that?
I think that is a really interesting idea. I think that can help bring people along the path. The rainbow body, there is some truth to that, especially in more prolonged states of meditation. Scientifically, where that comes from is if you this is going to seem like out of left field, but I'll bring it back. If you ever try DMT, one of the experiences that you encounter, aside from viewing hyperbolic geometry like on the walls or on your hands, is a chromatic aberration, which is when you see these different sheaths of color that kind of exude from objects. If you take medium to higher doses of LSD, you can see the same thing. Some people see it on mushrooms, not everyone, but you see this kind of like rainbowness of other objects. And that rainbow body is kind of like the solar causal body of Tifereth that is kind of like ascending to Kether. And the rainbow body is talked about in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, because then that is what kind of represents liberation. That's what represents enlightenment. And I think that theoretically, if you do liberate yourself from suffering upon exiting the body, you absolutely should theoretically have a choice, because if you can liberate yourself, then I mean, all bets are off as to what's actually possible then after that, right? After you leave the body,
Right.
But I think that is a pretty of secondary importance for a lot of people. because a lot of people say, yeah, when I become enlightened, I'm going to come back as one of the Dakinis, or I'm going to come back as a Bodhisattva, and I'm going to do all this shit. It's like, yeah, what the time that you're spent celebrating the fact that you're going to become enlightened, you could spend meditating instead. So one thing that the one thing that the Westerner tends to do is they celebrate way too early, and there's a story that there's that Tibetan story of it's called As Famous as the Moon, where this really poor guy that lived in a small Tibetan village had acquired, after working for weeks and weeks and weeks, this large sack of rice. And he was like, oh, yes, finally I have this huge sack of rice, and then I can turn this into smaller portions and sell it off to my community. And he went back to his super small house, but he was feeling really good. And he hung up that sack of rice right above his bed just so he could look at it. And he's like, man, I'm going to be able to turn this sack of rice into 2 sacks of rice, into 10, into 100. And then I'm going to be rich and famous. And then only the most attractive women are going to come to me. But of course, I'm only going to pick the most attractive one. And then, of course, we're going to have a kid together. And what am I going to name the kid? And then he saw the full moon come into view. And he's like, how auspicious. He says, I'll name the kid As Famous as the Moon. And just as he was uttering those words, he forgot to notice the fact that there was a mouse on top of the board that was chewing through the rope, and it chewed through the rope to get to the sack of rice, and the sack of rice fell on him and killed him instantly.
Wow. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what a lot of people do is they meditate once, or they do something once, and they go, wow, I am pretty awesome, aren't I? Man, whenever I become enlightened, I'm going to do this, and this is what the Buddha did wrong, and this is what all these other spiritual teachers do wrong, and this is what I'm going to do right. It's like, yeah, you could be meditating instead of talking about it, by the way. Just so you know.
Right.
Or instead of watching other people talk about it, it's like you could just be doing it, just reverse engineer it, figure out what they did, and then go do that thing instead of talking about it. Stick to it, which is really hard to do, because to learn about meditation, what you have to do is listen to people talk about it. And it then is really tempting to imitate that behavior and then talk to other people about it. And then you just kind of like procure this social currency to sell to a market of people who aren't actually buying, but are just in the window shopping.
Yeah. Or using non-attachment as kind of this like gimmicky phrase, like I'm just non-attached, Daniel. I'm just kind of non-attached and everything.
Yeah, or they'll say like, "Hey man, we're all just one. By the way, I'll sell you a tab of acid for $10." It's like, yeah, dude.
Right.
There's a difference between knowing something and experiencing something. Like there was, and this is one of the last stories. There was that story of a devotee coming up to a monk of the Ramakrishna order, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, the lecture that you gave was so amazing. You are surely a knower of Brahman, the ultimate reality." And he looked at this person. He's like, "What?" He's like, "I'm not a knower of Brahman. I am Brahman." He's like, "I am the ultimate reality." He's like, "The thing that experiences that's who I am." He's like, "I'm not a knower of Brahman. I am." And that is one thing that is a really good tool of discernment, because anyone can say, "I'm not the body or the mind." It's like, yeah, it doesn't mean you're enlightened though. I mean, you are in your natural state, but you haven't realized. That's why I try to make the hard serve argument that enlightenment isn't something that you attain. You don't attain it through taking degrees, or you don't acquire enough good karma, and the universe is like, oh, you just got to 10,000 points, and then they send you a fucking Walmart gift card of enlightenment. It's like, that's not how that works. It's, if anything, it's about uncovering layers to realize that that's how you've always been, which is something that's really important, because one thing that people often don't understand is that they're a lot closer to liberation than they realize. I would argue that everybody really is. It's just finding that auspicious set of circumstances to unlock that realization from within themselves, because they have to do it themselves. The stories of people going around and just being like, boop, on their forehead, and they're like, I feel it, or like people that like get exorcised from demons, and they're like, the Holy Spirit. It's like, yeah, dude, that's just another form of mental masturbation. The person has to liberate themselves, which is what the abyss. I guess I didn't get to touch on this before, but the abyss is the highest operation of severity, because you have to discard absolutely everything. You even discard your own bliss that you feel. If you somehow can come into intermittent pocket states of samadhi, you have to abandon the Divine Mother. You have to abandon everything to go into the abyss to come out of it. And then whatever you come out of that, you can use everything or nothing. But that is one thing that is really important to do. And a couple of the people in my inner circle, I have a couple rituals I've written to throw you into the abyss, and I've been helping out
Oh shit.
two people. Yeah, I've been helping out two people through that. One of them is doing rather well. They recently had their first Kundalini awakening, and the other one is doing worse than ever.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Is it, oh
but
shit. Okay, this
yeah,
is constellating into more questions, and maybe you could tell me about those rituals later. But
oh,
like,
absolutely.
is there seems to be this aspect of like of magic or awakening or meditation, like it demands a certain kind of balance in your life, and that sometimes, or maybe always, as you move closer to these things, shit is going to get stirred up, and you're going to have some difficult, shitty things to deal with before you like arrive. Is that fair to say? Like, is that a pretty common facet of this
Yeah,
path?
well, that's the biggest twist, is that the one thing that you're looking for, in order to achieve the thing that you're looking for, you have to abandon what you're looking for. So to come to the highest degree of order, you have to submit yourself to complete chaos. Which is really hard, because that is like a super major plot twist, because then you're like, yeah, but what about all those times I meditated for balance? And what about all those archangels that I summoned, and all those Enochian rituals that I did for balance and for peace and for compassion and peace and harmony to prevail, and for me to be, this and this and this, and that's just all I want. It's like, yeah, but that at the way that the universe is right now, that's how you get to it, is that if you are really willing to achieve that, you should be able to let it go. Kind of like how if you love someone and they're going to be happier with someone else, or they're going to be happier not with you, if you really love them, you should be able to let them go, because love is unconditional. And peace, or
Hmm.
that most sublime piece of liberation, is also the same, because peace is not subservient to your specific ideology of balance, because balance is different for everyone. The reason that the priests praise in temples are the same reason why meth heads break into houses and steal people's shit. They're both looking for the same thing. They're both looking for balance. So you have to realize that what you think is
Damn.
balance is really not what balance is, and you have to be willing to give that up. And it's really,
Oof. That's a
really
tough
hard.
one.
Yeah. But I mean, that
Oh
is the
shit.
ordeal of ordeals. That's
Yeah.
that's the shit. If you can do
And
that, you
that
you
is,
you will do it.
yeah. And that isn't like a, I think some people can hear that and assume it's like a one-time event, almost like a thunder crack that hits you, and then after that you're awakened. But it's a little more drawn out, is it not? Or
Yeah, it usually lasts months.
yeah,
Yeah,
damn.
weeks to months. I've never heard of it lasting a couple weeks. That would be amazing. For me, it lasted months. For other people I know, I've yet to meet people that have come out of it yet. I have one person of mine. I won't call them a student or a pupil or whatever, because I'm just I'm just helping them
Sure.
through it. They might see me that way, but
Yeah.
I certainly don't see myself as any kind of that, because I don't want anyone to follow me. I'm just giving them the tools, and then they're doing it all themselves. But I have one person that is relatively close to getting out of the abyss. But the only way to get out of the abyss is by diving deeper and deeper into it. So the only way out is in. And that is really,
Yeah.
really hard to do that, because it is a kind of death, and a way to leave every sense of peace and liberty behind. But you have to know that by doing that, you're going towards the real meaning of liberation, the real meaning of peace, the real meaning of bliss, because bliss is beyond peace and chaos. Because bliss is the thing that witnesses both peace and chaos, because peace and chaos are just different sides of the same scale. Like the Hermetic
Hmm.
axiom of polarity is that opposites are alike in nature and different in degree. Like something that's hot is really just less cold, and something that's cold is really just less hot. So peace is just less chaos, and chaos is just less peace. But bliss is above both of those, because with bliss you can be engaged in 1,000 years long of peace or 1,000 years long of chaos, and it will make essentially no difference to you. Now you will still suffer, you'll always suffer, but you'll have transcended that suffering, and you'll know that you are not the suffering, and that you can watch yourself suffer without being attached to it and still be blissful. So that's why the abyss is really important, because it engineers that into you, basically.
Yeah. How does one come back from that and still engage with their previous life? I mean, like if in my case I'm married and I have a child, but like would I come out the other end of that and find myself completely like in the wrong position with my partner? I mean, that's a messed up thing
No.
to suggest maybe, but like
Oh, you definitely wouldn't. You would come to that assumption long before you entered into the abyss. The
okay.
abyss has a way of like clearing it out. You're not going to come out of that and being like, "Hey, babe, so like I'm out of the abyss and gotta get a divorce. I'm enlightened now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, little bro, you're gonna have to raise yourself. I'm liberated now. You know, you're not gonna be like, peace out, motherfuckers. It's like, no, that's not how that works. There's that Zen saying: before enlightenment, carry water, chop wood. After enlightenment, carry water, chop wood.
Mm.
So you're going to be the same. There's a book called the Ashtavakra Samhita that I can send you a PDF of. Most of the time, unless you're a devout spiritual practitioner, it's pretty hard to see outward signs of liberation for people,
Hmm.
because there are many liberated people that are just about in the world, just performing their duties and just garnering to the temperament of their mind and body, but they're just completely detached. But if you're completely detached from everything and you truly are blissful, you shouldn't have to wear saffron robes. Nothing wrong with people that do that, because that's how I learned about Vedanta, was from monks who took those
Sure.
insanely interesting vows. But you should be able to do everything that you are now. You should be able to drink a beer and have a wife and a kid and do everything. And if anything, it should just be even better, because you are not attached, and you can truly enjoy everything as it is now, because you know that this too shall pass. And if anything, that's comforting, because then you can enjoy it even more now, because you know that it's not going to go, or because you know it is going to go, and you're not holding on to it. You're letting it be.
Mm.
That's the best way to enjoy something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask what you think about, or a lot of people are interested, myself included, in like finding my true will, like, and maybe this idea is bullshit, and you can tell me in a second, but the idea that like me in this incarnation, in this lifetime, as God or as the divine witness, whatever name it is, you know, the ultimate experience, like, is there a particular role that my highest ideal is meant to fulfill in this lifetime? And if so, what is the best way to go about finding the clue and doing that, instead of just mucking around in like a bullshit job? Or maybe your highest self works a bullshit job and does other good things outside of that, like, but true will.
Mhm. Yeah. So you're already doing that, because you are an aspect. Well, you are the same reality that I am, because it is the same witness that is witnessing itself through other reflections. It's different rays of light that ultimately all come from the sun. And there's a book called like the Stanzas of Dizion that Samael and Vuor and Helena Blavatsky have written about. It's like really fringe and kind of sketchy, but it gives a really interesting creation myth. And Vedanta, Swami Sarvapriyananda, who's the head of the Ramakrishna order, he presides in New York. The way that he explains the creation myth to kids is really interesting, because he explains it in a way of saying that the universe knew that it was perfect, but it didn't know how perfect it really was. So it wanted to give itself a partner to play with, so that way it could realize its own perfection. But the only way to realize its own perfection and to really come into itself is to be imperfect first, or have an aspect of you that is imperfect, because perfection is only anti-imperfection. So that is the only way. And now everything is still non-dual, because imperfection is still of perfection, because perfection is still in imperfection.
Hmm.
And it all comes from the same source. But there has to be a facet of you that has to learn about itself in order to realize itself. Otherwise, it never would, because that light of the unmanifest is self-luminous. After a light lights itself up, it doesn't require light from other sources because it's already lighting itself up due to its inherent nature of luminosity. So that is why you are here, because you are a unique iteration of the universe experiencing itself, attempting to put itself through a particular experience to learn more about itself. So it's putting it through the Joshua simulation or the Dani simulation to say, okay, well, let's see how this tiny little aspect of me reacts in this body and this mind. And then if I can come to know myself through that, then I'll reabsorb it back into myself. And then I'll just wait for the rest of humanity to do that, basically. So that is why you're here, is to realize that, so you can realize the true nature of your identity, because then the same thing that is experiencing your sense organs and your intellectual thought processes and your flashes of genius are the same thing that's experiencing all that through me, which is the same thing that's experiencing that through sentient beings that can have the idea that they are more than the body and the mind. I mean, the Brahman would theoretically then be absolutely everything, like the computer screen and everything, but more especially that light of awareness, because the thing that differentiates us from even the smartest animals that can do things that we can't is we know that there is an awareness of awareness. And that awareness of awareness is our identity. That is the sight of sight. That is the senses of senses. That's like doing that Om meditation of the Mandukya Upanishad, which I can send you if you haven't checked it out, because it is the Ah of the Om represents the wake world, and the U represents the dream world, and the represents the deep sleep world. And you can come to the conclusion that, well, there has to be something that's experiencing that deep sleep. So who's the thing experiencing that deep sleep? If it's not the body or the mind, then it has to be something that can experience that. And that is the fourth state. And you come to that through direct knowledge. So you really don't even need meditation if you can just constantly reflect on that and tell yourself that you are that ultimate reality that experiences everything. It is the seer, but it is not the seen. So, and you can do that through the really simple exercise of a Vedantic text called the Drigdrishya Viveka, which this might even be something good to wrap up with. Is I wrote about this recently, that if you can pick any object in the room and hold it, and you can say, okay, so stating the obvious, that object is not me. Obviously, if I'm holding my wallet, the wallet is not Dani. Yeah, it's Dani's wallet, but it's not Dani. It's like, yeah, fucking obviously. So then you can say, well, okay, well then maybe the hand holding the wallet is also not me. Yeah, if you chopped off my hand, you wouldn't say, oh, that's Dani's hand, because it could be anybody's hand that you chopped off. So then you can say, okay, well then maybe I'm not the arm attached to my body. Well, then if I'm not that arm, then I can't be the other arm, which means I can't be the chest that holds them. So if I'm not either of those arms or the chest that holds them, why am I the body? So then who am I to identify with the body? And then if that body isn't me, okay, well then if the body isn't me, then that means the mind must be me. Well, there has to be something that is watching those thoughts of the mind happening. So what is the thing that is watching the thoughts of the mind happening that psychosomatically affect the body, or like vice versa? So then you can start to do that with saying, well, these thoughts aren't me and these objects are not me. So then who am I? And that is a fantastic question to ask. And the answer is something that you already know, which is like that eternal witness consciousness that experiences, but is not all things. Kind of, it's the same way that this wallet isn't me, but it is of me because this is my wallet, because my ID's in it. So it's the same thing that your body is of you, but is not you. And your mind is of you and is not you. It's the same thing as a wallet, which is I can present it in a very fluid way like that, and you're like, oh yeah. But if you think about that, you'll still feel some dissonance with that, because then you're like, well, then
For sure.
what? Yeah, like, well, yeah, because that's a really brutal thing to say, because everything around you is about instilling your sense of self, and I am a super affirmative person. However someone wants to identify, I'll use whatever pronouns they want. I will affirm their identity. I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel comfortable. But that can cater to an identity that people never try to transcend. They find great comfort in that identity,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they never seek to get out of that, because it's like, I'm Danny, I'm a musician, I have long hair and it's fucking sick, and this is who I am. And they identify with that. And the affirmative thing about liberation is that you can still liberate yourself and still see that, okay, well, Danny just wants to have long hair and play jazz, and that's fine, and we'll just let Danny do that. And then you can still give into your temperament. You don't have to shave your head and put 3 lines of ash above your head and be like, I am now Shankara the seer. It's like, no, you can still like do whatever the fuck you want. Like you don't have to say like, no, I'm enlightened now, and you have to like walk around with a cane and give lectures at Harvard or something. It's like, you absolutely don't have to do that. Most liberated people do not feel the call to teach at all. They just do the thing, and they end up helping a couple other people, and then they just peace out. And a lot of people say, well, doesn't that seem kind of selfish then to just liberate yourself and then not help anybody else? And that is not correct, because one thing that you've already noticed is how the environment around you has changed since you have changed for the better. So the better you have become, the more that it's slowly affected the environment around you. So you're probably less angry, and you're more calm, and you're more compassionate, and you can have that conscious decision when something bad happens to you. You can think about it and say, okay, this is happening, but it's fine, and you won't immediately react to it as much. So if you're already having a net positive effect on your environment now, think what it will be whenever you become liberated. All you'll have to do is be liberated in an environment, and that will already just affect the people around you.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
just existing as a liberated being will be enough. But I mean, that's like the Maharshi effect, which is that the sage Maharshi like brought. He said that if 1% of the population meditated in an inner city, that it could like lower the crime rate. And the mayor of New York City actually had him bring in a bunch of his followers to the point where 1% of New York was meditating, and in a month their crime rate dropped 17%. So it's like,
I
yeah,
believe it.
that shit
Holy shit.
absolutely happens. It also might just be because then enough of the people were meditating that it just by sympathetic resonance happened. But that doesn't take away from the authenticity of that happening. But as you get better, so too do your surroundings, and that sphere of influence that gets better with you increases the further down along the path that you get, to where you will notice that the lights just start turning green, and everything just starts happening. Everything just starts falling into place. You're just never late to work, and life just becomes effortless. And that is an even greater indicator to move harder on the path, because you want to encounter resistance, because it is through that restriction and that resistance that you get closer to liberation. So what a lot of people do is they get really good at meditating and ritual, and then they get to the point where their life is peachy, and then they stop, because they're like, well, I did it, this my life's amazing. They don't even think about it, and then in a couple years their life's back to shit again, because bad things,
Sure.
in terms of bad things that happen, this too shall pass. In terms of good things that happen, this too shall pass. So you have to look beyond that and strive ever forward. So even if you make $1 million and you win a bunch of awards for films that you make, and you just become the super successful person, that should not change your meditation routine at all. If anything, you should probably be meditating even more, because you have more energy to work against, because all of that is going to be saying, oh yeah, dude, you did it, you're successful, yeah, fuck that, man. You meditated, you did the thing, now you can live life. It's like, no, your practice is only beginning when success starts to show up. So that is an even further inspiration to move inwards, is when shit really starts to work well. That means that you have to work harder to find resistance, and when you have to work harder to find resistance, that means that your vibration's higher, and you will eventually get to the point where you won't be able to anymore. So
Dang. Fantastic.
And
This has been
and you'll
a
be able to do
whirlwind.
anything. Yeah.
But in a good
and-
way. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
Or
Okay,
I'm grateful for
good.
it, and I think it's useful. Holy shit. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for doing this, and for all of your insight and your like savant level memory of all these texts that you've read. It baffles me, but I've also smoked a lot of weed and like drank a lot of alcohol in my life that has killed my brain up to this point. So my memory is not as good, but that's what I'm trying to fix in a certain sense with meditation.
Yeah, and you can certainly gain that back tenfold, I would argue.
working
So
on it
read
for
stories
sure.
about Swami Vivekananda. He would learn like a language in a week, and then be able to read like a 1,000-page history textbook about German history, and then just be able to memorize all of it and give a 2-hour lecture on it. It's entirely possible.
That's encouraging.
What the circumstances that you're born with do not mean shit in terms of what you can accomplish. It's the same thing with learning a skill. A lot of people, especially in the music industry, say, "Oh, I'm just not talented," and other people are just talented. Talent has fuck all to do with it. What happens is how often you practice and how hard you work. Because the greatest musicians in the world are not geniuses. They just practiced more than everybody else, and they just stuck with it. Talent has very, very little to do with it. There are rare examples like Mozart, but I can guarantee you that Mozart did not give a singular fuck about the fact that he was talented. He, if anything, he suffered unduly more because of it.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Whatever you did in the past, also there are people that will never be able to regain parts of their brain because of heavier drug usage. So if all you did was smoke weed and drink, that's pretty reversible, I would say.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But
oh yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Dani. Any closing words for anyone who hears this? Any final decree that's going to just unlock the lotus in their third eye points?
And this is when I plug like a 17 series masterclass that I'm doing for only $49.99 a month, and join now and I'll give you half off my ritual series while I'll initiate you into the secrets of Kundalini or something.
The secret of secrets.
Yeah, the of secrets. Yeah, it's the Arcanum Arcanorum. See, that's what people are missing. They're missing the secret of secrets. That's
right.
That's the real shit. People aren't ready for that. But it's still good to read those books. I still keep up with all that occult stuff just for fun. Well, and it's also still super interesting because once you have that key of non-duality, you can find it in everything. Because I can find non-duality in the works of Israel Regardie as I can in the Bhagavad Gita. Crowley touched it a couple times. He scraped up against non-dual realization. I don't think he ever fully realized, but I think he knew what the fuck was up. A lot. It's like really popular to shit on Crowley now, but to come full circle, since I talked about the OTO in the beginning, he is very, very, very important, and we still owe him a great deal of gratitude for bringing the practicality of the system of yoga to the West, because a lot of the other systems of yogas was you had to take monastic vows, and you had to take vows of celibacy, and you had to trade your life away to be able to do this. And he was like, no. He's like, you can be anybody and do this. And now there are swamis that come out and say that, oh, you don't have to be a monk to do this. You just have to live like one. But that was really, really important for someone to say that you don't have to be some super, super special person to perform these practices, that it should be for everyone. And it is. But that's one thing that I think we often forget. So a parting piece of wisdom that I give people, because a lot of people say, well, I feel like I'm just not really meant for this, or I'm not spiritually bioavailable enough to do this. Or the biggest comment I get is, yeah, but I'm just kind of stupid. Like my brain just isn't big enough for this. It's like, I really don't like that comment, because a lot of people are like, yeah, but you read books all the time. I was like, I guarantee you I'm not a super, super intelligent person. I've just dragged my balls through glass for a long time trying to figure this out. That's literally all I've done. There are people way smarter than me, but also intelligence doesn't have anything to do with it. It's sincere aspiration for liberation is all that you need. And as long as you can keep a sincere and constant aspiration for liberation, it will happen one way or another.
Yes. Then I'm on. All right. Then it's coming for me, baby. All right. Well, thank you, Dani. It was a joy to talk to you.